Coming up on the Sports Reporters.
It may not be as obvious as what he did at the Grammys, but 100% his presence on the stage is political. His lyrics are political. And so everything he does on Sunday, whether it's supposed to be or not, and I don't believe it's going to be heavy-handed, but it is political.
Welcome to the Sports Reporters. It is the biggest concert in the world, the Super Bowl halftime show. And it's Super Bowl 60 Sunday. It is Bad Bunny's show. What makes the choice of Bad Bunny different, of course, is that it is not a safe choice. At a politically fraught moment, with the country so divided ideologically, the decision to book Bad Bunny was always going to be controversial. President Trump said when the announcement was made, "I don't know who he is. I don't know why they're doing it. It's like crazy." They blame it on some promoter they hired to pick up entertainment. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. The question is, why did the NFL book Bad Bunny? Why did it choose not to play it safe? What were the considerations? And what does this moment say about an organization that has typically tried to stay out of the political fray? To discuss, we have a distinguished panel. ESPN reporters Don Van Natta Jr. and Kalyn Kahler and Professor Vanessa Diaz of Loyola Marymount University, who teaches a course on Bad Bunny, and her new book about Bad Bunny has just been published. So guys, thanks so much for having this conversation. We are, as we tape this, about 100 hours away from kickoff. Professor Diaz, let's start with you. For those who don't really know as much as perhaps they could, what has made Bad Bunny one of the biggest stars on the planet right now? Why does he matter so much right now?
I think there are so many different factors that have contributed to his immense success. The reality is he is one of the most popular artists in the US and in the world. And this didn't happen overnight, even though it has been, has felt very rapid. He is someone who came up as a Latin trap artist and reggaeton artist from Puerto Rico. And he was the most streamed artist from 2020 to 2022 and again in 2025. So he has really kind of captured the world. One of the things about him is he's always been really outspoken about the things he cares the most about. Number one, representing his homeland of Puerto Rico. And number two, speaking out about any other injustice that he, feels is important to him. That has included domestic violence, LGBTQ plus rights. And he has been outspoken about, against President Trump since the first administration. And yet, despite all of this political discussion that he participates in, his fame has skyrocketed, which is not typical for American artists, or really any artist. So I think that has really made him seem more authentic than others. And I think that we continue to see that from the Grammys speeches. And I think that we'll see it on Sunday as well.
What do you think, Professor Diaz, this signifies as a moment for Puerto Rico?
Well, I think that there's so many different crises happening in Puerto Rico that have been happening really throughout the 100+ years of U.S. colonialism in Puerto Rico, which Bad Bunny speaks really clearly about in his lyrics. He always has, but it became incredibly more pointed with his most recent album, Debí Tirar Más Fotos, where he has songs like Lo que le pasó a Hawaii, which basically say that he doesn't want Puerto Rico to become a state. Puerto Rico is going through immense displacement, forced migration, gentrification, and a lot of this has to do with the way that the U.S. holding Puerto Rico as a territory can really kind of manipulate it in different ways to offer tax benefits to wealthy Americans who want to live there, while Puerto Ricans on the island suffer as a result. He's very aware of this. He talks about this. But I also think it's important to understand the broader context for Latinos who are being criminalized, who are being terrorized and targeted by ICE right now. And so Bad Bunny's presence as the first solo Latino artist and performing completely in Spanish. He doesn't have English songs. So this is going to be a Spanish Super Bowl halftime show at a time when the Spanish language is being criminalized. The Grammy wins, the Super Bowl, it's a win for Puerto Ricans for sure, but for all Latinos. And I think that it is incredibly consequential politically and historically, even if that wasn't why he was chosen for the Super Bowl halftime show.
So Kalyn, you just reported a story along with Don that was published on ESPN.com a few days ago about the decision-making process here from the NFL's perspective. taking into consideration everything Professor Diaz just had to say and everything we know about Bad Bunny and his outspokenness politically, and especially about immigration policy right now, well, from the NFL's point of view, why get into the middle of this?
Yeah, so the NFL, this was a really interesting decision for the NFL because, as we know, throughout their history of the league, they've tried to stay apolitical, and they've tried to stay in the middle of and not anger any subset of fans. But really, what this comes down to with Bad Bunny is the NFL's primary goal right now is international growth. And actually, just yesterday at Roger Goodell's press conference, he said they're going to play 9 international games next year, which is a new record. This past season, they played 7, which had been the record. And so every year they are adding more and more games played internationally, more cities. And Goodell actually said that, he said something like, the demand is so high, we're having to turn cities down because everybody wants the NFL to play there. So the league is so globally focused. And obviously they see Bad Bunny having this massive global audience, this massive reach outside of the United States, a reach to a population that speaks a language other than English. And that's another focus of this NFL league office right now, is reaching the Spanish speaking market. I spoke to a couple NFL league office executives about their strategy to reach the Latinos in the United States and globally. This is a market that they targeted in 2020 when they were looking at their future goals for the next 5 to 10 years. What are the fastest growing populations? And the Latino population in the United States is one of the fastest growing populations. It's also very young. So they see a huge opportunity in reaching this demographic, and Bad Bunny is the artist to do that. And the reason I wrote the story that I did is because it was very clear to me like how Bad Bunny aligned with the NFL's vision for international growth, but it also seemed like a difference between how the league office was acting, because after Trump criticized the decision and Kristi Noem with the Department of Homeland Security criticized the decision, Roger Goodell, a few weeks later, doubled down on Bad Bunny as a performer. There was no flinching from the league office really whatsoever here publicly. And so I wanted to find out more about what was going on behind the scenes in the league office. Was anybody questioning this decision internally? And really what I found is there wasn't much of that either. I did have a club executive who attends the league meetings regularly. He told me that, well, I had a couple of them say that Bad Bunny has not even come up in the group discussion as a topic. And owners are typically not super involved in this decision anyways. Like, they find out kind of when the rest of us find out for the most part, unless they're on specific subcommittees. But I talked to another club executive who said, yeah, at first there was a little bit of like, okay, we're not really familiar with this artist. He speaks a different language. How is this a fit? And then very quickly, this club executive told me that the owners, for the most part, got on board with it because they realized, what is the league's main goal? International growth. And what can Bad Bunny do? Who is he? He is the biggest artist for the world right now.
Don, you've been covering the league for a long time, and you've covered it through this politically fraught moment, through the Colin Kaepernick issues, obviously the friction between the league, among the league and the players and the Trump administration. So to hear Kalyn talk about everybody getting behind this decision, which immediately provoked this response, this negative response from President Trump, what does that say to you about the process now and how the league is looking at political issues?
Jeremy, the league is a lot more sophisticated now about political blowback than they were back in 2017. When you go back and think about that moment when Colin Kaepernick took a knee at the beginning of the 2017 season and Donald Trump said he should be fired and used the language that he used, it was a massive crisis across the league. Owners were extremely upset about it, were worried that it was going to hit the bottom line. You had 6 owners that contributed to Trump's inaugural campaign, including 2 of the most influential owners, and Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones. And the players were extremely upset. And it was something that was playing out on our screens every week. More and more players were kneeling. You then had at an owners meeting, Bob McNair, the late Bob McNair, the owner of the Houston Texans, saying that the inmates are running the asylum. That put the league on fire. There were players outraged about it. And so there was really a laser focus on what this was going to do to the NFL brand. Ratings were going down. This is a very different moment. It feels like a lifetime ago that 2017 happened. Now the league is even more of a cultural juggernaut. It is clearly king when you look at the television ratings. And I think there was some grumbling. Kalyn and I discussed this behind the scenes of a couple of owners about Bad Bunny, but very quickly, I think people had conversations with them from the league office and other owners to say, look, this is perfectly in line with our global aspirations. The NFL wants to have an international game every single week coming up here in the next year or two. There's going to be 9 next year, as Kalyn said. And so now you have this situation where it's Bad Bunny is the perfect artist at the perfect time. He's a global superstar, an icon. And this is the moment, despite all the complaints by President Trump and others in the administration, the NFL is like, okay, now it's all about our business. He's what's best for our business. And we're just going to let that criticism go by the wayside.
I really appreciate everything that my colleagues here had to say. I think that there's one thing, just so we have a nuanced conversation here. I think it's really important. And thank you, Don, for bringing up the Kalyn Kaepernick situation. And I think when we talk about the NFL as an organization that has tried to stay out of politics, that Don's point makes it clear that that's really not historically the case. It's not just the donations that come from people who represent the NFL in different ways. It's these actually really explicited targeting of different forms of peaceful protest. I mean, Aziz Al-Shaair recently was fined for having the tape with "Stop the Genocide" across his nose. These are really kind of, I think, very peaceful ways of expressing oneself where the players haven't been able to do that, and they're still not. So I think everything we're talking about shows that despite the idea that the NFL would like to stay out of politics, they're not out of politics. And this just happens to be an incredibly savvy business decision that doesn't align with the political messaging we've gotten from the NFL. And I think that's part of what makes it so remarkable.
Well, what were you thinking the other night watching the Grammys, as I'm sure you were, Professor Diaz, in anticipation of what Bad Bunny might say with all those millions of people watching? And of course, you wonder what the NFL was thinking as well. What were you thinking?
Well, when I was watching it, the thing that always struck me about Bad Bunny is the way that he uses his platform. His very first time on American television was on Jimmy Fallon in 2018, and he went on TV and he spoke about Hurricane Maria and he critiqued President Trump's response to Hurricane Maria. So I hoped that he would say something, and I was really surprised at how kind of specific he got. I was further surprised by Roger Goodell's response the next day, because I thought perhaps this would spark a different kind of response. And once again, as Kalyn said, like at every moment, they're doubling down on the decision. And I think that, right, he said yesterday that this was, look at what he did last night. It just shows what an amazing artist he is. So I think that it's a bit confusing. It may feel contradictory. At the end of the day, it's a business decision. And I'm just really happy that the person who they're giving this platform to is someone who has something to say at a moment where his communities, people who sound like him, people who look like him, are being criminalized and detained and worse. And so to have this loud, proud Puerto Rican Spanish speaker is so historically and culturally significant. And I think maybe it's pushing the NFL. Yes, it's a business decision, but to have to continually double down on this, maybe there is some shift happening.
Yeah, I want to make one point, Professor, and I agree with everything you said there. Unity is the word that Roger Goodell keeps saying. That the message of Bad Bunny is inclusive. As he talked about at the Grammys, he said, "There's all this hate. What about love?" And that message.
This is exactly what Roger Goodell said.
Yeah.
Yesterday, he said the other reason, in addition to demonstrating that he's one of the great artists in the world, Sunday night at the Grammys, is that he understood the platform he was on, and that this platform is to unite people, to be able to bring people together with their creativity, with their talents, and to be able to use this moment to do that.
Yeah, and that when you look back at the Kaepernick era in 2017, there certainly could be an argument that Kalyn Kaepernick would make, and the players that kneeled, that was a unified moment, right? And yet it was not seen that way. It's seen through a very different prism. It was a danger to the league's bottom line in a way that Bad Bunny is not this year, because there is this perfect alignment in the global aspirations of the National Football League. And I think that really is what has changed. It may sound a little cynical, but in my conversations with people around the league, I really think that's what's driving this. The other part of it is clearly Jay-Z. Jay-Z has the job of picking the halftime performer. Roc Nation was hired by the National Football League in 2019 in the aftermath of the Kaepernick crisis. And there's a lot of faith that Roger Goodell and the owners have in Jay-Z picking the right artist. You know, we've seen Rihanna, we've Kendrick Lamar, Usher in the past few Super Bowl halftime shows. They've all been massive successes. Yes, this is fraught with a little bit more peril in a way that those artists were not. But again, I think the global branding, and you can't deny Bad Bunny's superstardom worldwide, and the National Football League, with everything they want to do internationally, this is a perfect moment for Bad Bunny to be the halftime performer.
Yeah.
Right, so Kalyn, how does that partnership work with Roc Nation?
This is actually kind of interesting because the partnership with Roc Nation actually was a result of this like national political crisis that threatened the league business when the anthem protests were going on. Because as part of that, the NFL owners and the league office met with a group of players, the Players Coalition, and the league presented them with a plan essentially, which was called their Inspire Change Initiative, which was to dedicate a significant amount of money towards social justice causes. And it's a partnership that still exists today. Something else that came out of that partnership was a partnership with Roc Nation to select the halftime performer and to advise on other performances throughout the year to create music centered around this Inspire Change Initiative and to amplify that cause. So the partnership still exists today. They're in what is this, the 6th year now? It started in 2019. And so Jay-Z, you've seen him consistently push the envelope every year and do something bigger, do something more different. He did the first hip hop rap halftime show in 2022 with Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent and company. Eminem was part of that as well. And there was a little bit of blowback on that year and criticism to that group as well, I remember. And so he's consistently pushed the envelope. But what you said is right, Jeremy. Goodell has said, he was at a sports conference at USC in October, and he said he doesn't challenge. He says Jay-Z knows I'm not going to challenge him much on his decision. And one thing that's interesting that Goodell keeps repeating, either when talking about Jay-Z or when talking about Bad Bunny, is that he understands the platform. He said that also about Jay-Z. And so I was thinking when I was watching the Grammys, like, wow, like, is Bad Bunny going to say ice out at the Super Bowl halftime show? Is he going to use the Super Bowl halftime show in the way that he used his Grammys platform? And when I keep hearing Goodell say he understands the platform that he's on, it makes me wonder if that is part of, the Super Bowl halftime show, is that you're not going to explicitly say things like that. I'm not sure. I was not able to get very far in the Roc Nation reporting. Roc Nation did not talk to me. I tried to talk to some of the production company that actually does the halftime show, Jesse Collins Entertainment. They did not want to talk. I wasn't able to interview Bad Bunny or anyone in his circle either. And so the question of how will he actually use this Super Bowl halftime show performance, I think, is still an interesting one. And obviously he's going to use it to unify. He's going to have a theme of the world will dance. That was the language that he used in the trailer. And I spoke to some people at Apple Music who said when they met with him very early in the process to say, like, what do you want to get out of this? Because they're the ones who promote this halftime show. Apple Music is the presenting sponsor. And the communications director at Apple Music told me that Bad Bunny directly told them, like, this isn't my halftime show. This is for everyone. This is everyone's halftime show. And I thought that was really an interesting, it's a direct quote from Bad Bunny through Apple Music to us to learn how he is approaching this. And I think it's been clear from all the promoting and, from how he is, as we've discussed here, like how he's used his platform in the past to bring people together. And as Goodell has said, that's what this is for unity. But going back to something Don said, I wanted to just read a quote from the story that I thought was really interesting from a club executive, comparing, sort of the previous way that they used to handle things and how this Bad Bunny decision appeared to him, at least. And he said last time, well, he was pointing out the difference between Kaepernick, that situation with the anthem protest, and Bad Bunny, which I think is a really good note to make here. They are not apples to apples, right? These are very different situations. Kaepernick and the anthem protest, that was happening every Sunday. That was something that was repeatedly coming up. And he said last time with Kaepernick, that was players and owners and the president. Bad Bunny doesn't affect any of that. It doesn't affect week-to-week games or television coverage. It's just a halftime show. And I don't mean that flippantly, but it's just a halftime show. And so I do think, yes, we can give credit to the league for, silencing, I guess, the outside noise and doubling down on a performer who has very specific views that are really important in this moment. But we have to remember that this, as Don has pointed out and as Vanessa has pointed out, like it aligns clearly with their international business goals, their financial goals this time around. It's not everyone's going to watch the Super Bowl. I mean, Turning Point is counter programming it, but I don't think that show is going to be much of a threat.
Show. That's
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think that show is going to be much of a threat to the Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show with Bad Bunny. So they're not risking viewership here, really. They're not risking any financial dollars in the way that the weekly sight of players kneeling during the anthem, how that ruffled feathers with sponsors and led to declining TV ratings. So it's a really entirely different situation, but it is important to just note the strategy in general.
Can I respond to a couple of quick things? One thing, I just thank you for pointing out the Apple Music relationship, because I think this is actually really important. Right? They've been the promoter since 2023. And this particular show is, I actually talk about this in the book, the significance of Apple Music and the career of Bad Bunny. Apple Music and their Latin music team, they're actually the first people to ever put Bad Bunny on a DSP, right? On a streaming service in a formal way. Before that, it was just like bootleg versions of his music. But they have cultivated this relationship with him since 2016. And so what we're getting here is not just all of the other things, that he's the first solo Latino artist, that he's Spanish speaking artist. He's also the first artist who really came up in streaming, who is on an independent label. That's Rimas, which is a Puerto Rican independent label. So this is really the result also of this long cultivated relationship between Apple Music. And I think we're going to see the sensitivity of that. I think we already saw it in the promotional materials, in the trailer. And so just to add to what Kalyn said about what are we going to see in the show? Is it going to be ice out? And I think I want to challenge everyone to kind of think a little bit more expansively about resistance and what that looks like, because this is, again, another thing that I talk about in my classes and in the book, that Bad Bunny comes out of a long line of Puerto Rican art and music as resistance. And the way that looks includes dance, includes joy, includes all of these things. So the world dancing in the context of Bad Bunny's work, that is actually an act of resistance. If you look at the 2019 protests in Puerto Rico, dancing and perreo, the dance of reggaeton, was a central part of the protests. And so when we think about the fact that he's going to be exposing people to instruments they've never seen, like the Puerto Rican cuatro, the güiro, genres most people aren't familiar with, like plena, which is the genre that the song DTMF is in. These are ways of showing Puerto Rican history, which are actually steeped in resistance. So it may not be as obvious as what he did at the Grammys, but 100% his presence on the stage is political. His lyrics are political. And so everything he does on Sunday, whether it's supposed to be or not, and I don't believe it's going to be heavy-handed, but it is political. And so I just want us to kind of embrace that it might not look like what we think of as protest.
And Vanessa, let me just jump in with one thought. It could be heavy-handed, though, in a sense, through some people's opinions, only because Bad Bunny, as you know, has been so outspoken against ICE. He would not perform in the United States. He didn't do a tour in this country because he was worried that ICE agents would be outside the arenas grabbing people. He's been very outspoken about that. He did his 31-date residency in Puerto Rico in large part, he said, because he was not going to tour in the United States. What he said on Saturday Night Live last October was very provocative. He sort of almost made a promise that he was going to be political on the stage at the Super Bowl. That's the context for all of this, which makes it so remarkable that the NFL has has hung in there with him, and any of the criticism that might be is really outlier type criticism behind closed doors of just a couple of owners, and Roger Goodell and the most influential owners are like, no, we are going to stand with Bad Bunny. And so it really is a remarkable moment. Despite all the sort of cynical business reasons why that's happening, it's still fraught with peril if he does decide to say something in a very provocative way in front of 125 million people.
Absolutely.
I mean, do you guys think that maybe the uncertainty, so many people, as we are doing now, asking the question, what is he going to say? Will he say anything? How far will he go? That uncertainty, is that in a way part of the appeal for the NFL? Because it's certainly not going to diminish the eyeballs, right, Don? You know the way the league works. Kalyn, you know the way the league works. That calculus, that risk-benefit calculus, how do you break that down? What do you think, Don?
Yeah, I think that's right, Jeremy. I think that is part of the appeal, is there will be people that are going to want to tune in just to see whether he says something about President Trump, about ICE. Certainly, there was a tease of that, right, on Sunday night at the Grammys. And so I think, yes, absolutely, from a marketing standpoint, and the masters of marketing is the National Football League, I think that they actually like that. And that will bring even more eyeballs. As we've seen in some past Super Bowls, more people tune into the halftime show than do the game. There's a spike for the halftime show. I think we will see that even a greater spike this year because of the anticipation, not only of Bad Bunny and just what a great performer he is, but what will he say? What will the reaction be? I think everybody is going to want to know that.
The other thing about Apple Music too that I wanted to follow up on is that they are a global music company. The previous presenting sponsor was Pepsi, which is a global brand, but has nothing to do with music. And so when Apple Music took over this presenting sponsorship, they took, because I spoke to a few people there. I spoke to Oliver Schuster, their president, and he said when they took over this partnership, they took it over at the intention of making it more of a global event, the halftime show specifically. So the Apple Music vision and the NFL vision completely align in Bad Bunny right now, which I think is really interesting. And as you pointed out, like they've had a long relationship with Bad Bunny going back 10 years now, and their streaming being him coming to fruition and peaking at the streaming moment is why we can listen to K-pop now, we can listen to J-pop, we can listen to Latin music, reggaeton, like things that like in your part of the country or part of the globe where you were before streaming you could never access. So all of this is coming together right now at the perfect moment. And one more quote I wanted to read, which I thought was just really interesting. This is from Javier Farfan, who is a consultant to the league office. He's worked for Roc Nation in the past. He's worked for Pepsi. He's a global brand marketer, essentially, and he's been working with the league since the first time they featured Latin music in the Super Bowl in 2020 with J-Lo and Shakira. And actually, Bad Bunny was there as well, and J Balvin, who at the time were very young, rising stars in reggaeton, but didn't really have the global audience that they do now. So I asked him in December, if he was surprised by the criticism, by the blowback that this choice had received. And he said he wasn't surprised because everybody has the right to express their opinion. But he went on to say, we have the right to do what we need to do for our business and stand tall against that, regardless of the noise happening outside. And I thought that was just a really, as far as speaking to people in the league office, as direct as they'll really get in terms of saying, like, this is our mission and we're not moving off of it.
I think just to this question of are people going to tune in just to see what happens? I mean, at the end of the day, the reality is that the controversial choice that Bad Bunny has made a lot of people pay attention to the halftime show who may not have otherwise. So the idea of like all press is good press in this situation. I mean, obviously the Super Bowl is like one of the biggest things that happens in the world. It's such a massively important stage, but I know many people who are going to tune in specifically for that reason. What is he going to say? And I do think that the Grammy speech sort of upped the ante. And I want to be really clear. I believe the show is going to be political. And I think, but my point was just kind of like that actually everything about it will be political. And even if we don't know the specifics.
Right.
Just
right.
the
You're saying
fact
it
that
might
it's
not
all in
be-
Spanish, just the fact that he
Exactly.
speaks fully in Spanish is like revolutionary, honestly.
Vanessa, I'll be in the press box for the game on Sunday. My wife will be texting me about midway through the second quarter. When is the show starting? That's all she's going to be tuned in for, is to watch Bad Bunny and to hear him speak. She speaks Spanish. My wife's Cuban American. She wants to not only hear him perform, but she's anticipating him saying something political and hopes he does.
Might be the biggest audience ever for a Super Bowl halftime show, breaking the record that Kendrick Lamar set last year. And this all started, 33 years ago, really, with Michael Jackson breaking the mold for the Super Bowl halftime show at the Rose Bowl. This has been a fascinating conversation. We're all going to have to tune in. Appreciate you guys joining us. Professor Diaz, Kalyn Kahler, Don Van Natta. Always a pleasure. Thank you guys for joining us here on the Sports Reporters.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.